Hi there, this is Tim Sommer. This is another edition of Musicview on WNYU, and tonight we're here with Glenn Branca, who's about to put out a record called Ascension, an LP called Ascension, The Ascension, on 99 Records, and Ed Bahlman, who runs 99 Records and produced Mr. Branca's LP. Now, I got that all correct, right?
That's the way it'll read in the Times.
Now, one of the things I like about you, Glenn, is the fact that you're sort of an artist who... What did you just do?
What?
Oh. One of the things I like about you
smoking my eye
is that you're an artist who sort of is very difficult to define. Obviously, there's an audience for you out there, but people seem to want to lump you either. You seem to have trouble putting you in one category or another. Some person will say you're classical, another person no wave, another person rock. You know, it seems to be a very sort of flexible audience for your music, which is very, very rare, I think. Something along these lines.
You mean it covers a bunch of categories, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, essentially, from what we've heard of the record and everything, and what we've heard of your past work, you're somebody who doesn't quite sound like anyone else, which is certainly advantageous, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I guess we should mention... What, Naomi?
Let's mention the background.
Oh, in the background, we do hear something from the Ascension, the LP. It's called Spectacular Commodity, right? Did this LP sort of evolve from your live performances of your symphony, or what's the relation between the two?
Well, most of the pieces are pieces that I wrote a couple of years ago, and the band has been performing them. It's got nothing to do with the symphony at all.
Yeah, this has been something the symphony being something that you performed this summer and last spring, and
well, that's a new piece. It's more recent than most of these pieces. I mean, the Spectacular Commodity is a piece we did about 2.5 years ago at the Performing Garage, and that was actually originally done by the Static, which is a band that I had at the time, and the piece is a little different than it was originally. We ran about 20 minutes.
Now it's down to about 12, you said?
Yeah, right. I basically just cut out the introduction. I mean, originally it was performed, the first part of the piece was done, we wore blindfolds and earphones, so we couldn't hear or see anything for the first section of the piece. And we don't perform that section anymore.
Yeah. How much of your performances, either live or on record, use a sort of whatever experimentation, or
what are you talking about?
Experimentation in the sense of performing blind and deaf.
Well, I'm not that interested in the performance element anymore. I'm interested in the music. So
Also, most of the people in the band wouldn't submit to having blindfolds on. They want everybody to know who they are.
Yeah. If we could go a little about your recording career prior to the Ascension LP, is that you did the first 45 that came out on 99 Records, which was Lesson Number 1, that was called?
Right. And
that came out about a year ago, was it? Or a little more than that, year and a half?
Well, it was almost a year ago, yeah.
July 80.
Yeah. And that was the first release on 99. And before that, you did release a 45, a 7-inch with the Static, right?
Right.
What was that called?
Well, the A-side was called My Relationship, and the B-side was called Don't Let Me Stop You. And before that, I had a band called Theoretical Girls, and we did a record. The A-side was called U.S. Millie, and the B-side was called You Got Me. And
now, Theoretical, as a label, or whatever, as a corporation, whatever they were, sort of continued after the Theoretical Girls disbanded? Because wasn't there some more recent releases having to do with the idea of Theoretical Records?
Well, Wharton put out a record. He played the drums with us, and he's been doing a lot of work on his own recently. And he had done some studio work and wanted to put out a record, so he put it out on Theoretical. I mean, the label isn't it's not a real label of any sort.
Yeah.
Basically, just the people in the band use it.
And when did the Static record come out?
Christ, I don't know. It was late '79, I think.
Yeah, that's an interesting record to listen to today, because listening to that, I get you get the feeling that it in some ways almost predated the feel that Joy Division was later to give. At either around the same time, but very autonomously. You get this sort of it's sort of a more I don't know the way it differs from the stuff that you're doing now. It seems to be more I guess structured in the traditional sense or something like that.
Right. Well, there's a little bit of Ramones there in the end of My Relationship. There's no doubt about that. At least that's the way I hear it anyway. I like that record a lot, but that was like the straightest music that band did. I mean, those are about the only 2 songs that even came close to real songs that we did, and we figured, well, at least especially in those days, if we were going to make a record, we want somebody to buy the fucking thing.
How is the underground, in terms of either the way they received you or the way you received it, the way you perceive it, changed in the years since you've been gigging with Theoretical, Girls and Static, and now, or the audiences that have come to see you? Because obviously, I mean, your career is something that's just spanned a big chunk of what we consider a New York underground.
Well, the main change, there have been a number of changes. One of the changes is there are a lot more bands. I mean, when this thing first started and people started calling it, or Roy Trakin started calling it No Wave, there were about 10 or 12 bands. And now there's, I guess there's about 30 or 40, maybe more than that. But the difference is that at the time, the bands were playing in the clubs, and now they're not. And it's kind of strange.
Do you see yourself as being part of the No Wave movement?
Well, Ed, why don't you say something?
Glenn doesn't want to say he is or isn't, but what else can you say? When they call it No Wave, they're talking. That was supposed to mean the bands that were pushing music to its extreme and still being listenable. And those bands just can't play now. They can't play in the clubs where they should be playing. They'll want the bands to open for
the English acts.
Yeah, English acts that
don't really work on the same grounds.
Are allowed to even do stuff that the New York bands aren't even allowed to perform. In England, they don't get paid any money anyway, so they're allowed to play in the clubs. They'll make $100, $150 in England birthday party. The Slits will make $200-$300 probably in England when they play, with some of their shows. And so when they come to America, they're offered, there's big competition amongst the clubs, and they're offered a lot of money. And then there's no money left for the New York bands. And New York is too blasé about the New York bands.
Well, the clubs know they can get the New York bands real cheap. That's the fact of the matter. I mean, a lot of the bands just can't play. And a few of the clubs know that just being able to play is...
Well, there's a very short history in the club scene. Most of the people who are booking it haven't been around in the early days and don't know who deserves to be supported and who doesn't. It's like a 2-year memory.
Right, yeah.
And that's a real problem.
Do you think that's why you, Glenn, have opted for sort of a different sort of venue than doing places at the Performing Garage, down on the piers, on the beach, the places where you recently gigged?
Well, actually, I'm not so interested in playing in the clubs anymore. I mean, the situation where you get a 45-minute sound check, if you get any decent sound check at all, it doesn't work for what I really want to do. And
what do you mean?
Well, I mean, in the clubs, basically have to do a band situation, and I'm interested in working with larger groups of people than a small band, and it just doesn't work in the clubs. You just don't have time to set up. You have to be able to have a chance to really hear what's happening, and if you're working with a lot of people, you have to work with it for a while.
That's interesting. Maybe you could explain sort of to the people who haven't seen you what your idea of a performance is, what your, when you say you want to, this isn't, rather than being just a simple like 4 or 5 piece or even 6 piece band up there, what your concept is, what you use.
I just want to feel as though I can use anything I want. I don't want to feel as though I'm limited in any kind of way. And in a band situation, you pretty much have to stay in a small format, and that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah. I think we're going to hear a song right now off of the Ascension LP. The song you'd like to hear is Lesson Number 2. I presume this has something to do with the Lesson Number 1, or would this be erroneous? No?
Yeah, it has a lot to do with
head.
Lesson Number 1. It's basically the same piece, except the guitars are not in tune.
Is there an advantage to using an untuned guitar? Is it randomly untuned or untuned to a different...
It's randomly untuned in this particular piece, yeah.
Yeah. What is the advantage of using that, or what is the reason behind it? Or?
Well, I wanted it to sound really ugly, really horrible, and it sounds pretty ugly.
Okay then, so this is Lesson Number 2 from Glenn Branca on WNYU Musicview. Lesson Number 2, Glenn Branca, excuse me, I'm sorry. Lesson Number 2, Glenn Branca from the Ascension LP. He's here tonight on Musicview. Listening to that, I'm very interested in sort of how you recorded this LP. It doesn't sound like it'd be the easiest either. It sounds like it'd be very easy to record or very difficult to record. What band was used in the studio? You're not playing all the guitars, are you? Or are you?
No, this was a totally live recording. It's the band that I play with.
You don't want to mention their names, Glenn?
Okay, I'll mention
You know
their
they're going to be
names.
listening.
The names are on guitars, David Rosenblum, Lee Ronaldo, and who else is on guitars? I'm playing the guitar.
Ned Sublet.
And Ned, right. And on bass is Jeffrey Glenn, on the drums, Stephen Wishworth.
How much of your music, either on performance or on this record, is spontaneous, is spontaneously combusted, or?
What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Is this all carefully written beforehand? The songs, do they take their structure in the actual performance?
Well, it's all written beforehand. There's no doubt about that. I try to leave as much room as possible for some kind of spontaneous thing to happen. As I said, the tunings in that last piece are random, so we never know exactly what it's going to sound like. And in the second part of that piece, it's not specified exactly how it's going to happen. I just give the cues.
Yeah. Is most of the LP recorded live or semi-live, or?
Most of it's totally live. Yeah, there's a few overdubs, but not too much. It's almost completely live.
How did you find recording, Glenn, in comparison to the other work you've done?
It was really strenuous. We were in on late hours. Everybody else has other things they're doing. So the band would get together 11 or 12 o'clock at night and go to 5 or 6, 7 or 8 in the morning.
And then you'd have to go to work again.
Yeah, and then we'd all have things we had to get done the next day. And Glenn had to, even one of the last times we mixed, Glenn had to do the kitchen benefit at Bonds. So we got out of there at 5:30 in the morning at the studio, and he had to go sound check at noon at Bonds and play at 3 in the morning at night. So, yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Is there a chance that you'll be recording the Symphony soon, or?
I don't have any plans to record the Symphony, no. It's a difficult piece to record. I mean, it requires quite a bit of money to do it properly. And I don't have that kind of money lined up at the moment.
Do you think it's sort of rare to have a piece that exists solely as a live, in a live form? I would think of it as being, a piece that really, as you said, doesn't really exist beyond a live performance.
Right. Well, what do you mean?
As you said, you have no and you've known.
Oh, well, it'll get recorded. It's just not going to get recorded in the immediate future.
Yeah. We're going to hear something more from the LP right now, the Ascension, which you mentioned before, the full name of which is the Ascension of Christ, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. I guess, and it should have been out for about 3 weeks by now, I guess, by the time this interview is aired, meaning that it should just be getting full saturation at about right now. This is Structure, is the name of the piece. This is the shortest piece on the record?
Yeah, it's only 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Originally the piece was about 15 minutes long, but it was a pretty bad piece. This is the part of it that I liked. It's pretty good.
All right, so then this is the Structure, or Structure.
Structure, yeah.
Just Structure. It's from the LP, The Ascension, from Glenn Branca. Structure from the LP, The Ascension, from Glenn Branca on WNYU FM, Musicview. Do you mention that you don't think you'll be gigging as much in the future once this comes out, or is it just that the gigs haven't been there? Or?
Well, as I said, I'm not that interested in playing in the clubs. I'll probably do a few club gigs. I still have some ideas for the band, but I'm more interested in in being able to play in a situation where I don't have any kind of limitations at all.
What do you mean? I mean, what do you define as a limitation? Or what do you define as not having limitations?
Well, in a club situation, you have to set up really quickly, and you have to do your sound check really quickly, and you have to be able to have something that can move in and out in one performance. I mean, I prefer to be able to set up, have a long time a chance to rehearse in the space where we're going to play, and get a chance to see what it sounds like and work with it for a while. And that's the kind of situation that we're going to work in the future.
Did something like the Performing Garage give you this opportunity?
Oh, right. We had about 4 or 5 days to work in the space before we actually performed there, and then we did 4 performances, so we had a chance to work with the space.
Yeah. The as I said, the LP is called The Ascension, and it is going to be out on 9/9 Records real soon. Ed, this is 9/9 LP number 1, right? Even if it's not in that order. Yeah.
Yeah, 99-001 LP.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not to be confused with 01 EP.
Which was Glenn also,
That's
right?
number 1.
Which was also Glenn. Do you find 9/9 giving you sort of the opportunities that you didn't have, either working with yourself or other labels might have given you, Glenn?
Well, I wasn't restricted in any way as far as what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, Ed basically just said, do whatever you want, and I did it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something about putting together your own label, or Ed mentioned something about you putting together a label, Glenn?
Right. I've been interested in starting a label for a while, and just recently I ran into somebody who had a little bit of money, and he was interested in putting some money into the label, so I'm starting a label.
Can you tell us any more about it? Like what sort of music you're going to be recording on it, or what form it's going to take?
Well, we've got about 10 or 11 records planned at the moment.
Yeah.
And the first few records are going to be by Sonic Youth and Jules Baptiste Red Decade and...
Naomi nods her head.
What? And probably Scott and Beth B. soundtrack. And those records should be out before Christmas. After that, we've got a number of projects. We're going to be doing some composers, Michael Byron, probably Phil Niblock.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons this interview has turned out the way it has is because I think in terms of the people who listen to the show or the people who listen to the station, you're even more left field than you might think you are. I mean, you're dealing with ideas that are very, very natural and very honest, but still they seem to be completely new. Both in concept and theory and practice.
Yeah, but the difference is Glenn has always been doing things. He doesn't just show up, you know, and say, well, here are my ideas now. Who's going to do something for me? Glenn has always had the attitude, you know, if nobody's going to get involved, he'll do it himself. And there's a lot of people that are just around that aren't getting involved themselves. They have their own ideas, but they're not making them happen.
Right.
So Glenn should be considered a major force in New York or in the United States, and it's going to happen, you know, before people realize.
Can either of you be optimistic about what goes on once the LP comes out? You know, just as you said, Ed.
I'm very optimistic.
Yeah.
I think it'll get a lot of airplay. I think it's a record that'll sound good on the radio. And the alternative network is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm personally pretty happy that the major record companies have stayed away from this scene, because it gives us a chance to get to a point where we don't need them, and we'll, by the time they realize there's something really happening here, it'll be too late. We'll be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And I like it that way.
Don't you think that's been a long time in coming?
It's been a long time.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Soon come.
I mean, a lot of people have talked about doing this kind of thing.
But it doesn't seem until, like, say, that Ed's been the first person to make any real progress with it, with just what you said, becoming somewhat self-sufficient. No one's really been able to do it the way Ed's been able to do it, it seems. And I don't know if no one will be able to.
Well, if Ed succeeds, other people will be able to succeed. I mean, it's if you set an example, I mean, that's part of the whole concept that I think is going here, is the idea of doing it and showing people that it can be done. And if it's done, it's done.
All right, I think that sums it up for another edition of Musicview. I'm Timmy Sommer. We've been here tonight with Glenn Branca and Ed Bahlman, and good night.